Jim, our next question via the Cult of Cornet Facebook group was sent in by Fred Esposito. Is there anybody that didn't like Bobby Eaton or had heat with him?
Oh, well, there are people he did not like. I don't know which when sometimes when the kids say had heat with or whatever, you don't know which direction it's going. There were people that he would, talk about in the car as we all would. Is that no good? Sorry, son of a was a stooge or stabbed somebody in the back or here's what he did or whatever. So he didn't approve of everybody in the world, but I don't know of anybody that actively disliked Bobby Eaton for being Bobby Eaton, or you know what I'm saying. They could never say, well, he fucked so and so around or stabbed so and so in the back or whatever. So while Bobby was not completely blind and didn't trust everybody in the world because he knew there was some, oh my God, George Scott's son, that fucking Byron Scott. God almighty, he would look at stooge. He'd mutter. Bobby would mutter every time he looked up, that stooge. And he would say, he will walk sideways at you. He would do the thing where he'd be walking down the hall and then Bobby would lean sideways at his waist where he's sticking his ear to your conversation. He'll walk sideways down the hall 50 feet to stooge on you. So he recognized some people, but nobody disliked Bobby.
Well, that's what I was going to say. What about the other way? Did you ever hear like, hey, this person's actually kind of pissed at Bobby, or this person doesn't like Bobby?
No, if they were, they probably wouldn't admit it because somebody would think there was something wrong with them or have a problem with them.
What about Stan?
I mean, I wish I had more. What, Stan being mad at Bobby?
No, did anyone ever get mad at Stan?
Oh, a lot of. Well, it depends. First of all, when Stan and Steve were together, they were somewhat abrasive to some of the heels that had to suffer the indignities at their hands. And let's put it this way: some guys were a little bit peeved at Stan without coming out and confronting him about it. That he didn't take quite as many bumps as Bobby did. It all came down to everybody. Well, Bobby does all the work. Even with that was an exaggeration. Bobby did a lot of the work, but look at Bobby. Bobby always did a lot of the work. But Stan would get residual heat. He couldn't keep up bumping with Bobby because he's making Bobby do all the work. So even if Stan did have some heat, it was generally as a result of how much people like Bobby.
For as gruff and tough as Dennis was there anyone that had a problem with Dennis?
No. And at the same time, Dennis was funny as fuck to sit in a locker room with. He could be gruff and if the need called for it. But no, everybody loved to work with Dennis because Arn Anderson has said out of all of the Midnight Express and he and Bobby were, best friends, but Dennis may have been the best worker of the bunch of them. In the ring, easy, night off, never any problem, mistake, whatever. So
what did Bobby think of Dennis's work? What did he ever say about it?
He loved it because Bobby had been a main event guy working for Nick, and Bobby had been featured for Jarrett, but he wasn't like one of the legends of Memphis wrestling at that point. But Dennis had worked not only in main event programs, him and Phil Hickerson as a team, but he and Don Carson, he and David Schultz, they'd worked on top in not only the Knoxville territory, but the Nashville end, and then the Jarrett Memphis end. They'd been to Georgia, various places. Dennis had more experience and he knew how to speak for himself more, stand up for himself. He knew more about the responsibilities of when you're being put in a money position. And he knew more about tag team wrestling instead of just, again, Bobby'd been partners with Coco. Bobby'd been partners with George Goulas. That would train you for a career at a high level. But he'd never been partners with a guy that had worked with big talent or in a main event spot, ongoing programs that had drawn money, and Dennis had. Dennis and Phil had drawn 3 years of straight money without even leaving Tennessee in 3 different territories. So Dennis was able to teach Bobby a lot about tag team wrestling, not as far as what moves to do, but like giving advice on how Watts wanted things done. He liked a more wrestling style presentation than the punching and kicking and chaos in Memphis. We would get to that, but we would be a wrestling heel team up until that point and work. If you've got 25 minutes with Wrestling 2 and Magnum TA, work goddamn hammerlock and keep it interesting and keep them up and down in the middle with spots with the manager or trying to milk the tag, whatever. The timing of putting something together where all the money that's being drawn on the cards is our responsibility because we're in the main event rather than Bobby and Coco being this week's opponents for Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee. It was a step up. So Bobby loved Dennis's fucking work.